Hope everyone can hear me. Hope everyone at home who's watching can see us and hear us. Welcome, Melissa Orange here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, surrounded by some of my favorite people in the business who also cover the SEC. We have Brian Holland, who covers LSU, as you can tell by his background, Matt Roberts, who covers Texas A&M, Chris Brees, who covers Alabama and Auburn, and then Kayla Anderson, who covers Vanderbilt and Tennessee. She's also the host of our Southeastern stream show that we do during football season. Guys, it's been a while. Good to see you. A lot's happened since we last talked. I think it was spring football when we talked last, but let's kind of just talk about how we feel about this 10-game all SEC schedule. Brian.
Yeah, by the way, you forgot to add in there the defending national champions,
bad.
the LSU
My
Tigers.
bad.
Just want to remind everyone that the trophy here in Baton Rouge. 10-game schedule, and it's going to feel weird because you start off, no cream puffs in that week one. LSU was scheduled to play UTSA and then welcome a huge non-conference game. I'm sure we're going to talk more about the non-conference games that won't be coming up here this September. We were going to have the Texas Longhorns there in Death Valley. And instead of, I think LSU was scheduled for one SEC game in the first 5 weeks, and now it's all SEC. You get to the meat of the schedule, it's meat and potatoes from the very start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, I think we just got off a Zoom call with Texas A&M and Jamon Osmond, some of those guys, and they're like, man, this is why we come to the SEC is to play in these games. When they were doing the schedule release the other night on the SEC network, it was weird not seeing Western Carolina pop up on anyone's schedule in November. So it's going to be a little different this year. But yeah, I think from an A&M perspective, you got to be excited. You get going with Vandy, which could have tougher games in the SEC, but it's not Texas State like it's been the last few years. Then you jump right into Alabama in Tuscaloosa, then Florida at Kyle Field. And so I think they jump right into it, but I think that they have the talent and a senior-laden team, more seniors than they've had in a long time at A&M. So I think they're ready for this and they're excited.
Yeah, Kayla, Drew, and Chris, you guys cover two SEC schools. What's it been like for your coverage, Kayla?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I will say everybody is enjoying just having something to talk about right now. So hopefully we continue to get to talk about an SEC schedule. I think it's great. I mean, the SEC is the biggest, it's the baddest. We all know that. And so when they're all playing each other, I just think that makes more excitement and more eyes on this conference. It's been interesting kind of looking at Tennessee's schedule, looking at Vanderbilt. I mean, Tennessee, let's be honest, this is the team that everybody is interested in seeing what happens this year. Just taking that momentum from what they did at the end of last season and bringing it into this one. And then on the other side, you have Vanderbilt, who's already had a handful of players opt out. I think Coach Mason has said he's not going to give details on how many, but it's going to be hard for them. I mean, they're an team that's already struggled offensively. We still don't know their quarterback situation. And then you add two SEC opponents to their schedule and you're thinking, man, how many wins are they going to get this season? But I think overall it is absolutely great to have 10 games all SEC.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it seems pretty obvious. Sorry.
No, you're good, Chris.
It seems pretty obvious that all of us are very happy, smiles on our faces that we're talking about football. In the back of my mind, I just feel like we have to get through the next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're already seeing so many instances of people saying, well, this college has COVID cases. This team is having some issues. If we can get through the next 2 weeks, I will feel a lot better about actually talking about games, whether there are teams in your market where they're playing the first week on September 5th week. We have UAB playing on Thursday, September 3rd. That's exactly 2 weeks from tonight. Or if we're talking about Alabama, Auburn, and all these SEC teams playing on September 26th, get through these 2 weeks, then I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. But then, yeah, Alyssa, we talk about the schedule. I don't think anybody got it more rough than Arkansas. You could claim there were other ones, but it was ridiculous what happened to them, let alone the situation with their coach.
Yeah, it's a lot to handle and swallow. Of course, Sam Pittman takes it all with stride and is excited, and they want to play the hardest season in the schedule in the country. But you talked about COVID, and Brian, you talked about non-conferences. Arkansas was supposed to play Notre Dame, right? And that was kind of their marquee game this year. And then now you see Notre Dame has already gone virtual because of the outbreaks that they've had on campus already with students. So it's crazy what would have happened had SEC teams been allowed to play that +1 like the ACC was able to. But yeah, you want to talk about hard? How about opening up with Georgia? And I guess if you're going to have a brand new head coach, which luckily for you guys, none of you have to deal with that. But this is where he came from. He had 3 years at Georgia. And so I guess that's a plus. I guess the plus of playing Florida is that you have Felipe Franks now as your quarterback, and he knows that team and is familiar with that team. So I guess that makes that a little bit better. But as Matt understands, they're going to have to go to Texas A&M this year instead of playing at AT&T Stadium. They're going to have to go to Missouri this year instead of playing at Arrowhead Stadium. They haven't won more than 2 games a season in the past 2 years, haven't won an SEC game in 2017. So it's a lot to handle for Arkansas right now. So at least they're practicing because they haven't even been able to do that. How's practice going for you guys?
I think it's great. I mean, everybody's undefeated right now. So, a couple days in, no shoulder pads on yet. But, I think the energy that they've talked about here at A&M for the last couple days has been fantastic because they've been caged up essentially and haven't been able to get out on the football field. Jimbo was talking, I guess it was Tuesday, and he said, look, we haven't been on the field practicing football since December for the bowl game. And so I think they had that kind of taken away from them. And now it's back, and you see that urgency. And I think there's that little extra added urgency, knowing that, in A&M's case, it's not starting with a Georgia, it's not starting with somebody like that, but you're still starting with an SEC caliber opponent, whereas normally you wouldn't be doing that. A&M's schedule before, you were looking at them with their non-conference, the way they're 8-0, possibly headed to Auburn. So there was a lot of high expectations for this team this year. And I think that having that taken away has them just so much more excited to just come charging out of the gates. And the energy and intensity has been really good here in College Station, at least.
I would say from the Volunteers standpoint of things, I think the excitement there is continued on from last season. I think these guys are ready to go. I will say there was a couple of them on a Zoom conference call today, and I liked the attitude of these guys. I mean, we all know these are really young players, and there's going to be a lot on their shoulders this year if they do decide to play. And I think one of those things that they have to deal with is just the accountability at such a young age. And I loved what Eric Gray said for Tennessee. He said, this is the season we want to have the most leaders we've ever had. You don't want to jeopardize yourself and the rest of the teammates. I thought that was a great statement made that should just kind of echo throughout every team in the SEC that's going to have a chance to play this year, right, guys?
And it's not just in the SEC. You're looking at this everywhere. How many teams out there are you seeing them saying, we're being so cautious, we're being so careful, we're doing everything in our power to make sure we can have a season? That's great to hear, because that's going to be the only way we're going to be able to actually have games on September 26th. Here in Alabama and Auburn, they've been taking it extremely seriously. Imagine Nick Saban, him not taking this seriously. I think you guys laugh at that, because there is zero chance that somebody like Nick Saban would not do everything in his power, and he has a lot of it, to make this season get going. I don't foresee Alabama or Auburn having any issues with COVID-19 on their team. I know there was that Auburn outbreak on campus, but some of the players talking to us this morning even said that they're all starting to get it, even some of the players who didn't get it, and there are plenty of teams who have players who don't get it. But he said that a lot of their guys are starting to get it, and that's all you can really ask for.
Yeah. How's the defending national champions holding down the fort there?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can get into that. I do think an important distinction, though, especially for the Big Ten crowd, the Pac-12 crowd, even some of just the national writers, I think they're not wrapping their head around that some of these outbreaks really happened in some of these southern cities. And I'm thinking of course, Louisiana. New Orleans was that huge hot spot. And Shelley Mullinex, part of that LSU task force to deal with this, did a very good Q&A, I believe it was with The Athletic last week, and just said, look, because of that outbreak, we had to think of this probably 2-3 weeks before some of these task forces in the Big Ten or the Pac-12, if they even existed, had to really get after it. So LSU, unfortunately, because of COVID really hitting us hard and hitting us early, I think it really kind of jump-started things from the SEC perspective. And then the SEC goes, oh, wait, LSU, you're already doing this, this, and this? Okay, let's all compare notes, and let's be an open book for everyone. And you can feel the cohesion, right? We talk about it all the time. It just means more. It just feels more like kind of one of that dysfunctional family once again, where, yeah, we've got each other's backs until Saturday afternoon and we line up.
Yeah, I really think they've handled it really, really well. And like Chris said, we got to get through 2 weeks. But I appreciate the SEC saying, okay, we're going to start fall camp and see how that goes. Once school starts, we're going to see how that goes. And let's get to September 26th before we have any kind of crazy decision making where we say we're just going to stop right now. Because if you think about it, being tested 3 times a week, guys, that's the most that anyone in the country, maybe even the world, is going to get tested.
Well, what struck me the most, and what I think will go a very long way into playing a season, is think back to last week when the Big Ten said myocarditis is a huge thing for us. Pac-12 said the exact same thing. Those were basically two of the main reason why they weren't going to play, right? Well, then the Big 12 came out, 2 days later, and they said, well, we're doing all this heart testing, like you said, three COVID tests a week, so many heart tests. So we are going to be very careful about myocarditis. You can assume the SEC and the ACC are going to do the exact same thing. And if that's true, if they're doing all these heart tests, that myocarditis issue could be non-existent if they're doing all the testing. And like I say, I think it'll go super far in letting them play this year, if that was the fact why the Big Ten was saying that.
Well, especially now, because you just saw the Georgia State quarterback that is not going to be able to play this year because he's been diagnosed with, it says heart condition, obviously, the effects of COVID-19. I'm guessing it's something along the lines of that. So I'm guessing, just it being a Southern place too, that these guys are looking at it in the SEC and saying, we have to be extra careful now.
Yeah, I think, and you look at, myocarditis, Joel Klatt was talking about this the other day when he played quarterback in Colorado. They had guys that came down with myocarditis after a bad bout with the flu. So to act like this is something brand new that we've never seen before or never known about, it's definitely not. And I think, credit to the I can't believe I'm saying it, credit to the Big 12. No, I'm just kidding. But they, they came out and got ahead of it and said, this is what we're doing to prevent this. And, like you said, the SEC and the ACC, they're all, I'm sure, going to follow suit.
I don't know if you guys have seen that spoof video that came out yesterday with the SEC and the ACC and the Big 10 guy or Big 12 guy in the car. But we really are. Yeah. It was pretty funny. It was great. And if you haven't seen it, it's on Twitter. But if
or NAT, right?
Yeah. When you look at what we're trying to do here with the SEC and playing football, you really do have to rely on those other 2 conferences, even though it was in a joking matter, because like Greg Sankey said, he doesn't know if it's a smart idea for the SEC to be the only football conference playing in the fall.
Yeah, it seemed obvious that it was going to be a majority rules. If you have 5 conferences in the Power 5, if 3 say they're going to play, great. If 2 say they're going to play, well, what if the ACC came out and said, well, we have too many teams in too many areas and all the spread, and we got some hot spots, and all that. Miami's been a huge hot spot for however many how many weeks there's been. If they would have left, I mean, they still could. What would the Big 12 and the ACC be thinking right now? That's the kind of domino, I think. We always talk about dominoes. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. If one of those conferences says we're not playing, I don't know how you feel. Brian, or Matt, you guys want to chime in on this. If one of those conferences falls, I think everyone's in serious trouble.
Yeah, and I think having, obviously we cover A&M here, but we also cover Baylor. Baylor's a huge part of our market as well, so I kind of have my foot in both of those camps. And I think they are codependent on each other. And when you see schools like Carolina and you see schools like Notre Dame and the ACC that are canceling, stopping practice because of COVID outbreaks, that does make you nervous a little bit because, like you said, if that one domino falls, being the ACC, who's been gung-ho with the other 2 conferences, I think there's definitely strength in numbers on this. And, if one falls, then there's going to be some serious reconsideration from those other conferences.
You talk about momentum with those dominoes, but from a legal standpoint now, what happens? I think if you're a college football fan and you are just focused on watching college football, that's your only interest, you are thinking, okay, we've got to get these kids in a bubble. And look, the student body coming back is probably bad for the chances of a college football season happening. So you look at North Carolina, you look at Notre Dame, and it's almost like some of the right dominoes are falling, if you will, because then, all of us, hey, look, we tried to bring everyone back. We tried. We gave it our best effort from a legal standpoint. We really did try this out. It's not in the best interest. And now if they can go online only. Now, I know this flies in the face of keeping them as amateur athletes. So this debate and probably legal battles and just this time overall is going to be really fascinating to study from years on and seeing some of those ramifications and how this all does really play out too.
Yeah, and I think one other thing is we've talked to Dave Aranda. You know, there's also some national championship rings here in Waco, Brian, not just there in Baton Rouge. Dave Aranda and his staff, and he talked about how, you know, as he wants those senior leaders to lead those guys and know that you have to do things different. You can't be a normal college student right now if you want to play football. And so I think the senior laden teams are going to be more and better equipped to deal with this because they have a little bit more, you know, leadership qualities to those teams.
We had Rakeem Boyd, who's the running back here, senior running back at Arkansas, and he tweeted the other day, my mom's in town. She's trying to get me to go to the store. I'm not going. Like, that's the kind of mentality these seniors have. And then when you ask them about being a role model, but also holding your other teammates accountable, like, you can't have a teammate who wants to go out, you know, and have a drink or something with a friend and then come back. And you got to kind of hold everybody accountable.
Yeah, you definitely do. And that's, like I said, that's going to be a lot of weight on their shoulders this year. I mean, I understand. I was that age once. I remember college. Like, it's right. I mean, it's some fun times, but again, this is such an odd year, and you hear time and time again, these guys want to play, right? I mean, we've heard from majority of these players, they want to play. Then they have to take the extra step to play this year. Nothing's going to be normal. They accept that. And I think it is going to be a challenge, but if they really want to play, they've got to follow by all the rules and beyond. I think what will be interesting, you guys, though, is we've seen these kind of breakouts with these COVID cases during the practices that they've had in some of the camps. But at the same time, what if that happens during the actual season? It's like, it'll be right. It'll be interesting to see what happens with games, if they have to cancel certain games and if they can reschedule, or if it's just going to be up in the air and you play as many games as you can get in.
Because we're talking so much about preseason and making it through the next 2 weeks. What's to say something happens in October? Nobody is going to be afraid to say, okay, we're stopping our season, period.
Sure.
I mean, the SEC feels very grateful to be in the position they're in right now. Let's say they play 2-3 games. If there's a bad outbreak on a couple of campuses or a couple of teams and a couple of teams have to stop playing, nobody in any conference is going to hesitate to say, we gave it a try. We have to stop because of how serious everyone's been taking this for 5 months. It's not going to be, Alyssa, you're talking about how kids are being held accountable and keeping the freshmen accountable. They have to do that through December. They can't stop in October or November and say, okay, we're fine. This is going to go on week by week. And I don't want to be pessimistic. I say 2 weeks, but after that, it's going to be, okay, hold your breath. Can we make it to the next week? Can we make it to the next week? Major League Baseball is a good example. They barely made it through unscathed a few weeks ago with you know, Miami and St. Louis barely getting by. If a pro sport says we're done, you talk about dominoes, that could happen to college football too, and say, okay, the pros can't do it, we can't do it. And we haven't even gotten to the NFL yet, because keep in mind what Greg Sankey said a few weeks ago. He wants to see the NFL and how they do it.
Yep.
How the NFL does it.
And I think, yeah, there's certainly that element of the, you know, the conferences striking out here and trying to do this. But again, if you have a quarterback room and somebody gets in your quarterback room and all of your quarterbacks are wiped out, I think Mac Rhodes at Baylor said you might just have to get used to the fact that a game or two will probably get canceled this year and just have to kind of be comfortable with that.
Yeah, Hunter Yurchek talked about that. I'm talking about like when this started, when they were bringing people back at the beginning of July, that they might have to group guys on like, this is our first team, second team, third team. So you don't have 4 quarterbacks in a quarterback room, and then you have no quarterback for that week. And so it's going to be really interesting when we continue to talk to a lot of these coaches about how they're handling spacing all their players out. Real fast before we wrap up, because I know we're all busy, I just want to go around, everyone say, and kind of talk about the team that you're covering, maybe what we can expect. And Matt, we'll start with you. Brian, we'll end with the national champions.
Yeah, the Aggies certainly do not have any national championship prowess there, but I think there's certainly some optimism for this team. As I mentioned, it's a senior group, and it's led by Kellen Mond, who has started since his freshman year and has matured to the point where he is the leader of that team. He's the unquestioned leader. He had to battle early on with Starkel and those guys, and he outlasted everybody, and he's still there. So I think that certainly helps. There's a lot of leadership on both sides of the ball that the Aggies can lean on. And this is year 3 for Jimbo Fisher. I mean, they're just more comfortable in that system. I think they're more comfortable with how they do things, how they go about doing things. I think the big question is going to be, you know, surviving that early schedule, going to Tuscaloosa, coming back and playing against Florida at Kyle Field. Don't have Johnny Football this time. He couldn't even beat him last time. So that's always tough when the Gators are coming down, especially with the team that they're bringing this year. So I think if they can withstand that early surge and that early schedule and put themselves in position to win a tough game at LSU, or at A&M against LSU, that's certainly turned into quite I'm not going to call it a rivalry. I don't know if we can call it that yet, but it's certainly a game that has some juice to it.
Auburn's got to feel the exact same way. That early schedule, Georgia at Georgia, week number 2. They have LSU right in the middle of it. They always struggle with Texas A&M, who you mentioned. Oh, then by the way, it's Alabama at the end of the year. And Auburn is always a team who's so fragile with how they're feeling week to week. If they're down on the dumps, they're down on the dumps. If they're sky high, they're sky high. So the first 4 or 5 weeks will be very crucial for them. And Alabama, I think they are very happy that week 2 is Texas A&M and not week 1, because they are notorious for being a team who's figuring things out in week 1. You've seen them playing in non-conference games first week of the year, and they look kind of okay. They look kind of weird, and then they get better at the end. The fact that they have a week before Texas A&M will say a lot, and then I don't see them having any issues outside of that until they hit Georgia. But I have no idea what to think about Georgia, to be honest with you guys. You guys may have your own thoughts on that, but no idea what to think about Georgia. Brian, I'm sorry to say it, but I don't think LSU – I'm not an Alabama fan or anything. I don't think LSU is the same team that they were last year, although people did say that last year at this time about that team that won the national championship.
Yeah, Miles Brennan shooting up the Heisman odds this week. So that was something we're kind of tracking too. I guess I'll kind of jump in. The first week, how about this? The Pirate comes to Death Valley.
Yeah.
I know Matt's excited.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Cannot wait for that now. But, hey, look, new quarterback there for the Bulldogs, a new offense technically. And then you go to Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt back-to-back years for the first time since, how about this, 1938. Then you play Missouri. So
it's crazy.
New coach, Vandy, Missouri at home. Not bad. So if you're breaking in that Heisman contender, Miles Brennan, to go to Florida that week 4, that is a great setup as far as your first 3 weeks. That is all you can ask for. The other interesting note that I had was, we had Arkansas back up in October where we usually play them in November. Now they have moved Arkansas back to that cold month of November, and it can get really chilly up there on the hill. Was this November 21st? So that's something that if you want to talk about a team that maybe matures and catches you in a bad spot while you're looking ahead to a trip to Texas A&M and then finishing with Ole Miss. And by the way, it's sandwiched right after Alabama. So the definition of a sandwich game, LSU with, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but tons and tons of talent. I know a lot of it went to the NFL draft, but there is a ton of talent. They still think their strength is their defensive line. It's a really mature group. You've got Miles Brennan, who if he comes around, he's playing in a great offense for him. He said it's the exact same offense that he played in high school in Mississippi when he broke all of the passing records for the state of Mississippi. And then you have Terrace Marshall, who was leading the nation in touchdowns before he went down. The Gatorade Player of the Year at tight end, Eric Gilbert, coming in. So you got, trust me, LSU's never going to be void of talent, and it's just kind of how they navigate this schedule, like we've been saying, if they can.
Bama's at LSU too. Keep that in mind. They always struggle, at least for the first couple of quarters, at LSU. That's going to be really good.
I would just say for Tennessee, we all know the hype that they got at the end of the year with those 6 straight wins. They returned 18 of 24 starters. They have a lot of talent. You saw what they did in terms of recruiting too. Jeremy Pruitt just seems to be working his magic. I don't know if he pulled a lot of tips from Saban in his time with Saban, but he's doing something right there on Rocky Top. It will be interesting to see who wins that quarterback battle. I think you want to go with Jarrett Garantano just because he's been there. He's the most comfortable with the system. But at the same time, he never seems to be consistent enough throughout the season. So I think that's something to watch. But overall, I think that they'll do a nice job. I think it didn't help, though, that they had to replace those nice games against Charlotte and Furman with Auburn and Texas A&M. But, hey, they did beat Auburn. The few times they play Auburn, they did beat him a couple years ago. So, maybe maybe that can happen again. As for Vanderbilt, you guys, I hate to be that pessimistic person, right? Because I love Derek Mason, and I do like what he's done in certain parts of the team. I think that defense will look good. I mean, he's a defensive minded coach. He always tries to have everything up on defense. They've made some coaching changes, but I just look at the offense and I said, you can't find a quarterback. Like what is going on? Last year they had so many issues, and if you don't have a guy to run the show on offense, and somebody obviously is going to be new this year taking it over and not very familiar with the program, it takes some getting used to. So I still question this Vandy team and just the amount of wins they're going to be able to get. But then again, you know, it's football, it's college football, anything can happen. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them this year.
Yeah,
quarterback.
one quick thing I wanted to jump in. Brian reminded me of it. A sneaky matchup to watch: A&M versus Mississippi State. There was no secret that Mike Leach and Texas A&M never got along when he was in the Big 12. Now he's in the SEC. You know, Pirate beats a soldier. I think he certainly annoyed a lot of A&M fans. So I'm really glad from a wrestling standpoint that storyline is back in play.
Yeah, well, back to what Kayla was saying, quarterback woes is nothing new for Arkansas. Luckily, they have a guy this year named Felipe Franks who has experience in this league coming over from Florida. The one thing I really can say about the Razorbacks is be on the lookout for a surprise. I think they will surprise us. I'm not saying they're going to contend by any means, but there are 4 winnable games for sure on the schedule. The 2 Mississippi schools. A&M, I think, is a winnable game because it's always competitive. It's always been close, and it's almost like Arkansas tends to lose that game more than Texas A&M really controls that game. The only issue with that is Arkansas has Texas A&M after a bye, but Texas A&M is also on a bye before Arkansas, so that doesn't really help to their advantage. And then I think at the end of the year, Missouri at the end of the year, that Thanksgiving weekend like we're used to. You do have Barry Odom now as the defensive coordinator, who of course was the head coach at Missouri. So there's a little bit of upside there as well. I see Arkansas again surprising some people because they do have talent. And according to Kendall Briles, 75% of the offense is installed already without a spring practice. I'm pretty sure under Morris for the past 2 years, it was like at 35%. So we'll see what happens. Have fun at Auburn, Chris.
Yeah. Well, well, you know what? Gus never lets his guys call the plays anyway, so I think it's irrelevant.
That's smart. Well,
although
hey guys,
he allegedly is this year, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe halfway through the year he'll just blame himself and take it over. So thanks you guys so much I know we're all busy, so we're gonna go get to work. But this has been fun, guys. It was good to see you and talk some football.
All right, we'll see you
Thanks,
soon.
guys. Good to see you guys.